Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Lorraine McGlynn. I am a clinical psychologist and holotropic breathwork facilitator. And I'm going to make a brief video today kind of looking at trauma and holotropic breathwork and how holotropic breathwork can facilitate trauma healing. Because I am offering an upcoming holotropic breathwork workshop at Menlo Mountain House in Dewa Spa, Phoenicia, New York, October 19th to the 22nd. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about trauma since that's going to be the topic of that particular workshop. So I'm not going to talk too much about the whole practice of holotropic breathwork because I have some other videos on that. But in holotropic breathwork, Stan Grof, who is the originator of this work, really identifies two kinds of traumas that people experience in their lifetime: traumas of omission and traumas of commission. So traumas of omission are things that we didn't get that we needed. So it would be like if you were a baby and you were crying and you didn't get picked up, or you weren't provided proper nourishment, or you weren't kept safe, and your needs weren't met. Maybe you were never told that you were loved or cared for. Maybe you felt or were abandoned in childhood. So there's things that we needed that we didn't get. And traumas of commission are things that happened to us that should not have happened to us. So these would be things like car accidents, serious medical illnesses, operations, any kind of abuse, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, anything that the psyche or the body perceives as a threat to its safety would be traumas of commission. And so in holotropic breathwork, there are ways to work with that kind of material on the mat if it does come up. So a little bit about how holotropic breathwork facilitates trauma healing. I'm going to use some of my notes because I just really spent some time researching this in quite detail and looked at a lot of the research on not only trauma but how the deeper and faster breathing and the body work and the group process and the mandala drawing and the music and the whole context of how the paradigm of holotropic breathwork is really does support healing trauma. So one thing to know about trauma is there are two kinds of memories, implicit and explicit. So implicit memories are memories that are formed and accessed without your conscious awareness. So it's stored in the unconscious and unprocessed. So these are typically nonverbal, sensory-based, disconnected from your explicit narrative memory, so you don't have a narrative or a story about it. They're difficult to access through talk therapy because they're in the unconscious, and they're stored not only in the body but in the autonomic nervous system, and they're typically out of normal conscious awareness. So sometimes we have reactions. So for example, people with trauma sometimes are triggered by different things, smells, sounds, different situations, and they're not quite sure why that trigger's happening, and that's because those memories are stored in the unconscious and they're still affecting the person on a somatic and an emotional level, but the person doesn't have access to the memories because one of the functions of your brain is to protect you. So sometimes things are kept out of conscious memory that could be potentially hurtful or dangerous to you. So what happens sometimes in holotropic breath work, the trauma can get experienced in different ways. So some ways would be the somatic releases, so you might feel people or see people trembling or shaking or having kind of spontaneous movements. Some are experienced through emotional expression, so crying or grief or fear or rage, sometimes anger. And eventually that does, when that's fully expressed, that does give way to a sense of relief, people report. Sometimes people have regressive experiences, so they're experiencing things that they felt and experienced in childhood. Sometimes people have birth reliving sequences, so they're processing something that may be a perinatal trauma, especially if it's related to a biographical event in their life. And sometimes people have symbolic or archetypal contents, so this would be mythological or collective representations of personal trauma, and then also going into the transpersonal realm. So sometimes they can have experiences connecting to, in the supportive spiritual dimension, to deities or gods or goddesses or things that represent spiritual healing to them or represent safety or support. And ultimately, as with all holotropic breath work, Doing this work brings you back to a place of integration or a place of wholeness. So whatever's happening within the holotropic breathwork experience in regards to trauma is going to be fully supported by the facilitators in the room who are extensively trained in creating safe and supportive spaces to go into these experiences. And I think especially when working with trauma, the safety and support is essential for someone to feel like they can go into a place that could be really uncomfortable or scary. And so having said that, we give people, well, we say holotropic breathwork is permission giving, because we give people permission to express what they're experiencing in the mat in whatever way they need to kind of bring it to full awareness and give it an opportunity to heal and discharge. So we give them permission to maybe safely express what they have maybe previously suppressed in terms of trauma, because it can be really challenging to feel anything that feels traumatic. A lot of people have physical sensations with trauma. They have shaking, they have trembling, they have sweating, they can have anxiety, they can have panic, they can have, certainly dissociation is really common in trauma, and that can be really uncomfortable for people. But we work through all of that with people on the mat. Also, they have an opportunity to release the emotional energy. They can use sound. So some people articulate through sound to release the emotional, energetic imprint. They may laugh, they may yell, they may sing. Sometimes there's a lot of physical movement on the mat, shaking of the hands, moving of the body, releasing the somatic imprint of the trauma. And sometimes they release it through the breath, because this is all about breath work. So they use the breath to release the trauma. And they get to kind of go underneath the defensive layers. Your defenses are there to protect you. So to be able to surrender and be vulnerable and go underneath the defenses helps people to really access the imprint of the original trauma in the psyche. Because as I said, a lot of times it's held in the unconscious as an unprocessed memory that still has a charge attached to it. And also, when people have the capacity and the ability to go into the trauma and really experience it in their holotropic breathwork sessions, it kind of creates this emotional resilience. They come out the other end when the session's over, and a lot of people feel a sense of release, a sense of trust in themselves that they can handle, the traumatic experience. And it's not like a lot of people ask, are you just re-experiencing the trauma? And it really isn't about re-experiencing the trauma. It's about experiencing the trauma in a different way and having a different relationship to it. So, for example, if you had a traumatic experience as a child where you were aggressed in some way, or assaulted in some way, or abused in some way, you're in a state of powerlessness as a child. There's nothing you can do to protect yourself. There's a sense of helplessness. And that can really stay in the psyche for a long time, and it can create a lot of fear in your lifetime, a lot of avoidance of any kind of interpersonal relationships, a lot of social isolation. And again, people are not aware why they're doing this. It's just their psyche is doing this to protect them in some way. So there's this sense of, being able to go into the trauma in a holotropic breathwork session. You're going into the trauma and experiencing as an adult. So you have different resources available to you as you're experiencing it as an adult. If you were in a powerlessness situation on your breathwork mat, you have the ability to protect yourself, to fight back, to punch pillows, to scream, to take back your sense of agency from what happened to you originally if you were in a helpless situation. And you can ask for help and you can receive it. So if you need someone to sit next to you and hold your hand while you do this, if you need any kind of support during your session, you can ask for it and receive it. So it kind of changes the imprint of the trauma in the psyche when you have a different experience of it as an adult. You have different resources and different capacities that you can use in your holotropic breathwork session that were not available to you when the original trauma happened to you. So it's a very complex topic, but I personally have worked through a lot of PTSD in holotropic breathwork over the past 15 years now I've been doing holotropic breathwork. And the safe and supportive setting with the trained facilitators, and like I said, all the components of holotropic breathwork, the community, the the set and setting. The set is about your intention going in, like what do you set as your intention for your session. Not that you're guiding your session or projecting what you want it to be, but if your set and intention going in is to surrender and to be vulnerable and to trust the process. I think that's essential. Trusting the process and knowing that you're going to be safe is imperative if you're going to be working with trauma. And I think those are the reasons why people can work with trauma and holotropic breathwork. Now, certainly it depends on where you are on the continuum of trauma. If you've never worked on your trauma, if you have complex PTSD, if you're having challenges with dissociating a lot, there may be some preliminary work that you would need to do before coming into holotropic breathwork. But typically when people register for my workshops, they fill out a health questionnaire, and if there's any concerns on the health questionnaire, I will communicate with the person and kind of assess whether I feel like this work is appropriate for them, where they are in their healing journey. So we do a screening process to make sure that everybody's going to be safe. So that's a little bit about trauma. Like I said, it's a very immersive topic, and I have 2 trauma specialists in addition to myself coming to talk and support the group in October. So I feel like the group will be well supported. Again, the workshop is October 19th to the 22nd at Menla Mountain House in Dewa Spa in Phoenicia, New York. If you are interested in registering, you can email me at drmcglynn6@gmail.com. So it's drmcglynn6@gmail.com. And if you have any questions about working with trauma or holotropic breathwork, you're certainly welcome to email me about that also. So just a little background on trauma and the ability of holotropic breathwork to work with trauma. And again, I hope you can join us. And if you can't, maybe we'll see you at another workshop. Take good care.